What's up everyone and welcome back to Reload Reacts. My name is Trey and today we are going to look through r/NuclearRevenge, the subreddit for those who take their revenge to the most extreme of lengths. This is episode 38. This first post is by Never Gonan Give You Up. Karen gets burned. This is a burner account. Tried posting on Pro, but my burner account doesn't have enough karma. Names and places have been changed to protect the innocent and the not so innocent. Some years ago, I started working for a heavy industrial manufacturing company. I lucked out and got a great supervisor for a boss, Joe. The work was hard, working 12-hour days for 13 days in a row, and then a Sunday off, then back for another 13 days. I was young and didn't mind. It helped my wife and I save up for a house. After about 6 months, Joe noticed I was picking up on the work pretty fast and promoted me to a group leader position. This came with a raise and increased responsibility that most other workers didn't want. Joe would put me in trouble groups in his department, and I would work on general improvements and figuring out the issues. This was a union shop and the mentality was to just put in your hours. Don't work harder or smarter, just do your time and don't kill the job, was the unspoken motto. After a few years, Joe was promoted a manager and he transferred me with him to his departments. While I wasn't a supervisor yet, I was the supervisor in all but the name. The supervisors loved it because they never had to leave the office, and I liked it because it was a good learning experience. I made a good reputation and got a lot of respect from workers and from management. Eventually, Joe's areas were doing so well, he was promoted to plant manager. As before, he wanted to promote me with him, this time to a supervisor spot. We talked in length because the only supervisor spot open was working for Karen. Karen was female, a minority, and a member of the LGBTQ community. She was the poster child on the company website of the inclusiveness in the workplace. Literally, her face was the one they used. She was also a freshly minted manager, and Joe was not confident in her abilities, but me being the plucky go-getter with a can-do attitude decided to take the position. I had to interview with Karen and got to meet some of her supervisors. They were very quiet and reserved. Once I was promoted and worked in tandem with another supervisor, Chris. Chris was young, had one small child, and his wife was pregnant and a stay-at-home mom. During the first week, everything was going well. I was learning all of the employees, getting to know the process and getting my feeling for the area. During the second week, Chris's wife went into labour and she had a hard time. Chris went on paternity leave for 6 weeks and I was tossed into the deep end in charge of the whole area solo, with 60 employees. I was barely treading water, but was doing my best. When I would ask Karen for guidance or assistance, she would scoff like it was beneath her and tell me, if I have to do your job, then I don't need you. So I gritted my teeth and worked my tail off. My wife got me a smartwatch and I was averaging 25,000 steps a day trying to keep everything running. We were holding our own and employees all did what they could to help as the satiation was not ideal for everyone. A few weeks in, I was reviewing some quality documents and I noticed that one of the quality gates was not being followed. I emailed the info to the quality engineers and they lost their minds. This was a 4-hour operation on a 20-hour part that we were skipping entirely. Turns out one of the reasons Karen got promoted was because she was running her department so efficiently. Then it came to light that she made the decision to skip this quality process, saving that 20% of the time. Except the engineers never signed off on this and it caused massive damage control. The process had to be reinstalled and the parts that were never checked had to have warranty extensions. This caused the company to have egg on their face and Karen to look bad. During this time, Karen also became more vindictive. She would openly tell people she would never be fired and could do what she wanted. She would walk the departments and if she didn't like someone, she would make the supervisors write them up by the end of the day. She wanted us to find a reason, and if we didn't, she would take it out on the supervisors. For example, forcing the supervisors to stay late to do some inventory or something else menial just because she could. She would not let the supervisors make any decisions until she approved, so something like overtime had to wait for her approval, and she would not respond until the end of the day, causing the departments to scramble. Then, if there weren't enough overtime employees to do the work, she would blame it on the supervisors. While the supervisors knew this wasn't right, we all needed our job and tried to do the best we could for Karen and the employees. We were mainly rodeo clowns, to Karen being the bull. The first day Chris was back, him and I were both pulled into Karen's office. She started berating me on how poor of a job I was doing, making her look bad and how I never came to her for help. This made me speechless because of the previous comments she made and the fact that supervisor work was beneath her. After the meeting I was still a bit stunned, but I put it together that she was about to railroad me out of the company and this was the first step. I called Joe and asked for a meeting that same day. When I got together with Joe, I started telling him about the things that were going on, that he had no idea, the harassment, the abuse, the vindictive nature. Ironically, while I was speaking with him, another supervisor called him to complain about Karen as well with the same grievances. Joe was stunned and said he would speak with Karen, but he gave me carte blanche on any spot in the company starting next day. He really didn't want to lose me. I did a lateral transfer to a different department doing engineering/IT work and I thought that was the end of it. A few weeks later, I was leaving work and Karen mentioned that I never turned in my laptop and phone to her. I told her I didn't know I had to, but that I could give it to her tomorrow. She smirked and said she would get it back soon enough. I didn't think too much of it at the time. After about 6 months I had my review with my new boss Jake. The review went great, and he was very happy with my work and a bit surprised at how fast I picked up things. At the end of the meeting, Jake mentioned offhand how Karen tried to intervene in the review and get me fired, but Joe stepped in and squashed it. "Okay, Karen, now you peed me off." After I left Karen's department, the turnover rate went through the roof. The supervisors were quitting at a rate of 1 every 3 months. Keep in mind that this is a legacy company that had multi-generations working. Fathers, mothers, sons, entire families. Some areas had 3 generations working side by side, and yet Karen was rolling over employees and supervisors like a steamroller. Working for her became the kiss of death. I casually mentioned to Joe about the turnover, and he told me he couldn't figure out what was going on. People were quitting without notice and no one was doing exit interviews. I told Joe that Karen was writing people up to force them out. When they would hand her the resignation letter or 2 weeks notice, she would tell them to leave immediately and throw away the letter. Then she would tell HR that the person quit on the spot and that was the end of it. Joe told me that because of who she was and how high she was, the company wouldn't do anything to her until they had an airtight case. So we went to work. I took the supervisors working for Karen out drinking after work a few times a week to make sure I had my hand on the pulse. If someone was quitting, I made sure they emailed their letter of resignation to Karen and CC'd Joe and HR, stayed for their exit interview, and that they called the company integrity hotline for good measure. Things were progressing well, and I had all the supervisors on board except Chris. Chris really needed the job, and Karen was not writing him up. Through a stroke of luck, I found out Karen was lowballing his raises as a cost-saving measure. That's why she was not harassing him. When I told Chris, he was furious and wanted to quit on the spot. I encouraged him to speak with Joe before he leaves. Joe and Chris had a very productive meeting and Chris decided to stay. Now all the supervisors were on board. Joe brought in an HR bigwig from the headquarters in Kansas, and over the course of a week, each supervisor was sent in for an interview discreetly without Karen knowing. By the time the interviews were over, they had emails, texts, eyewitnesses, and a mountain of evidence. The next part I heard from other people, HR, Joe, etc. Despite everything, the company wanted to keep this quiet, so they brought in Karen and said they no longer needed her and offered a very generous severance package. Karen, being Karen, lost it on the HR people. She threatened to sue for discrimination and even called a lawyer. That's when the company pulled out the stack of evidence and rescinded the severance offer. After a few months, Karen found a new job as a plant manager in a different factory and I found out where. I casually mentioned to the union reps at my factory where Karen was working and suggested that maybe they should give the union at the other factory a call. She was fired within 3 months for employee harassment. Last I heard, she had to sell her house and move out of the state to find a job. This next post is by a deleted user. Bratty's stepsister framed my baby brother and I snapped. Until 3 years ago, I lived at both of my parents, 1 week at my mum's and 1 week at my dad's. 10 years ago, so literally less than a year after the divorce, he was living with his new girlfriend, whom he was not going out with before he left my mum. Yeah, right. Said woman got 2 kids, 2 horrible entitled brats, but I kind of pity them because it's their mum's fault if they're like that. Anyway, back then I was still living with my dad, his entitled narcissistic girlfriend and her spawns of hell. The youngest, who was 8 years old back then, is even worse than her brother, and she did not get better growing up. When you imagine the clique high school bratty bully girl, you see her. She was spoilt rotten by her mum and she believes she's entitled with everything. The worst is that she's actually really pretty. Academic wise, she is doing remarkably well, she's popular, and she is captain of her school's basketball team. Now don't get me wrong, I have nothing against achievements or successful people, but I do hate people who get everything in life and feel like they have to rub it in other people's faces and make them feel miserable. When this story happened, she was just 8 years old, but she was already a pain. What happened is she waited for the parents to be gone for a romantic dinner/evening, leaving me as a babysitter. Back then I was like 13 or 14 and had to watch 3 kids, and needless to say I wasn't paid. Everything was going okay. She and her brother did try to trigger me, but I had figured it's better to just ignore them. My little brother was in the basement playroom building Legos. About 10 minutes before the parents got back, we knew because they called to tell us they were about to get home, the yesy brat trashed her bedroom, knocked her own arm on her bedpost to get a mark, and hid her saved up money in my brother's room. When the parents arrived, the show and the crocodile tears started. She was crying and wailing that my brother hit her and stole her money. They went to my brother's room, found the money, and my little brother got badly grounded and he wasn't even given a single chance to explain or defend himself. Much later that same night, I was in my little brother's room trying to comfort him, but what do you want to say to a little kid who believes his father doesn't love him? Then, the little bee creeped in and with the worst smug grin ever, told me what she did. She said, "I remind you she was 8 back then. Soon your dad is gonna send you away to live with your stupid slutty mom. I can't wait to see you 2 RFers get out of my house." And she left. I was furious beyond words. The next day, when we kids got back home from school and the parents were still at work, I was doing the dishes of the morning because my stepmom and her kids never cleaned up after themselves. The little brat came by and complained about how lousy a maid I was, and she said, "You're almost as and useless as your brother." She almost spat the last word and taunted me, saying that it was a matter of time before my dad sent him to an asylum for people like him, as she said. Listen, I'm not a violent person, but I couldn't stand it anymore. I grabbed her by the collar of her shirt, slammed her against the wall, and took a knife to her throat and said, "Listen to me, you little bee. I am done with your S. You want to pick on somebody? Fine, come after me. But if you ever do something to my little brother, if you ever insult, hurt, or frame him ever again, I will unalive you. And don't worry, I don't care about going to jail. If it means the world is rid of a waste of a human you are, my life is hell as it is, and my little brother is the one good thing I've got left, and I'll be damned if I let you torment him. Got it?" And I pressed the knife more on her throat. Enough to hurt, but not enough to draw blood. She was petrified, her eyes wide with pure terror. It was the first time and the last that she saw me angry. She never bullied my brother after that, or me for that matter, and she never told the parents. Every once in a while doing the dishes, I'd grab a knife and smile at her. I told my brother years later, and he told me he knew I had done something because, okay, proud sister moment, you've always protected me and I don't need an Essie dad when I've got a superhero for a big sister. Aww. I cried and I regret nothing. This next post is by Karasu Tepes 80. Try to strong arm evict me illegally? We'll see about that. This happened back in 2010 when I lived in Winter Garden, Florida with my husband and his dying uncle. Background: my husband and I moved in with his sick uncle after losing so much during the 2008 housing market crash in the US, like many of my husband's lawn maintenance customers. We also moved in with his uncle into a condo because his uncle had stage 4 that of the liver, and his self-entitled sister and her family refused to help take care of him. My husband, a retired county sheriff's officer, important later, and I got ourselves set in the condo's 2 bedrooms, as his uncle had himself set up in the living room including his bed. On the first day, we found dangerous black mold caused by a leaky dishwasher. On the second day, we found the master shower had loose tiles and a leaky shower head. On the third day, we found a nest of brown recluse spiders in the living room. We talked with his uncle about these problems and found out that the slumlord, friends with self-entitled sister/aunt and her family, was refusing to take care of these issues as required by law. We wanted to start legal actions then, but my husband's uncle talked us out of it several times. The slumlord was nice to us so long as my husband's sick uncle was still alive. The very next day after my husband's uncle died was a completely different story. Slumlord had turned nasty, aggressive, and began to try and strong-arm evict us like we were nothing more than drug addict squatters. Slumlord even bowed up and aggressively tried to fight my husband. When we dropped off our next rent check, he kept telling us that we had to move or else, but yet refused to follow actual Florida laws to evict us. Slumlord and his corrupt Winter Garden Police Department code enforcement officer wife even recruit my husband's self-entitled aunt and uncle to start harassing about just moving even if we had to live in a tent. Self-entitled aunt, why don't you and my RSO nephew just move so they can rent the condo to another senior? Husband, we don't have anywhere else to go yet, and he must go through eviction laws or get into very serious trouble. Self-entitled aunt, you're nothing but trouble. Retired SCSD officer nephew, you've been problems since the day you were born. Get out of their condo and stop being a problem for everyone. Who cares if you have to live in a tent? All of this made my retired officer husband, who specialized in uncovering corrupted law enforcement, very suspicious. We talked and began investigating slumlord and corrupt code enforcement wife. My first order was to place all rent into escrow with evidence of repairs that have been neglected. Second, I sent a notification of cease and desist of harassment to the slumlord and self-entitled aunt. Next, I researched public property tax records. Woohoo! Pay dirt there! Slumlord's condo wasn't registered as a rental property with the state of Florida and was paying far less in property taxes than slumlord should have been paying. Property tax records also showed that slumlord did not own the condo. It was still deeded to his mother, which I found out had been living in a retirement home for 5 years before my husband's uncle moved in. My husband found out that corrupt code enforcement wife had been inspecting and signing off on hers and slumlord's properties, including the condo, which is against Florida code enforcement conduct laws. I found out from neighbours in the condo that slumlord had only been renting to seniors with severe health issues. My best discovery through next to tax evasion was finding out that the Condo Owners Association had a very strict no renting/leasing policy, meaning you or family had to live in the condo and couldn't be rented. The revenge. Now that we had all of our evidence, my husband and I began to knock down all of the slumlord's dominoes. My husband went and filed a complaint with the Winter Garden Police Department about corrupt code enforcement wife and her perjuring inspections on her family's properties. My husband has a glowing record in the county, and with the FDLE for having over 200 clean arrests and taking down nearly 60 corrupt public officials, including Child Protective Services in the early 2000s. This background helped push WGPD to open an investigation into corrupt code enforcement wife. They discovered that not only had she perjured inspections on her family's properties, but also on my husband's self-entitled aunt and her uncle's property as well. This got corrupt code enforcement wife fired, stripped of her state enforcement officer's license, and convicted of multiple crimes. I sent all property tax fraud evidence to the Florida Property Tax Division. That got the state to investigate Slumlord. The state found that not only did he commit property tax fraud on the condo, but also on a property that he was renting to his son and self-entitled aunt's son, along with business tax fraud and income tax fraud. Both Slumlord's son and self-entitled aunt's son were also busted for possession of illegal narcotics with intention to sell when investigators came to the rental house they lived. I never expected that much fraud to be found from all of this, but I'm glad it happened. The business tax fraud of Slumlord affected self-entitled aunt and self-entitled uncle as well, since they were his business partners. Self-entitled uncle then came under investigation by the USPS board as he was the postmaster of Winter Garden. Self-entitled uncle lost his comfy job and pension after it was discovered how he was assisting Slumlord in the tax fraud scam and for stealing money orders. All four were convicted of multiple white-collar crimes, had to sell their properties and most of their stuff, serve some form of time and pay huge amounts of fines and restitution. Slumlord, his wife, hubby's self-entitled aunt, and hubby's self-entitled uncle, along with their sons, all went down for multiple crimes, both felonies and misdemeanors, all because they thought they could strong-arm evict us. Just proves how smart we tenants can really be when pushed. Also proves why everyone should know all rental laws and how to research public records because it can save you in the end. This last post for the month is by Background Wave 2513. You're gonna out me as gay to everyone. Prepare to have your entire future go up in flames. This was almost 7 years ago. I grew up in a small town from hick country. Always knew I was gay. Everyone else is homophobic. Was planning on staying in the closet till I move out, etc. You know the song. 7 years ago, a certain senator from Vermont announced his candidacy for President of the United States. And me being the edgy high school senior who couldn't keep his mouth shut, I went all in on the online activism, mostly on Reddit, but most importantly on Twitter, where I had a fan account with around 10,000 followers that I wouldn't shut up about. This didn't go over well with everyone, but people knew my politics and I was just a terminally online 17-year-old high schooler, so no one took it seriously. I guess my parents got a few comments at church, but that was about it. Even at school I lacked self-awareness and wouldn't shut up about the Democratic primaries. I wasn't antisocial or anything, but most of the people I hung out with were dorkier than me, and at least as unself-aware. Here's the one thing I didn't account for. If you harass your entire rural hick town to follow your Twitter account, maybe don't use that account to like gay pron. There were likes from half a year prior, so you had to scroll a while to find them, but a guy from one of my classes, let's call him Alex, went through that trouble and sent screenshots to practically everyone at my school plus my parents. This wasn't easy for me, but the landing was softer than I expected. My parents took a week or so to adjust, but were eventually fine with it. Other adults in town avoided me, but that wasn't much of a change, and people at school picked on me for a while, but it dwindled down fast. I was still livid with what Alex did, and I wasn't letting it slide. Besides, it wasn't entirely harmless either. My parents were willing to live with it, but were still homophobic and outwardly so, and either way, who wants to have their prawn history shown to their parents? Alex was a top of the class straight A student with an Ivy League aspirations, and definitely Ivy League qualifications, plus he could go the legacy route through his dad. His future was also fully dependent on his parents' money. I needed to hit these two aspects of Alex's life and turn them into smoke. Alex's parents were the kind of movie clique of small town rich folk, old money, dad is a lawyer, good standing with the community and the church, conservative, involved in local and state politics, etc. Alex was a spoilt rich kid. Nothing intrinsically wrong with that, but it comes with its fair share of rebellious dumb things you do as a spoilt rich kid. So, here's how I used his past to destroy his future. Alex dealt drugs for a month when he was 15. Again, he was a well put together valedictorian, so totally out of place, but he just wanted to do something on the edge, I guess. I knew this because we bought our weed from him through a friend one time. He still had the conversations and was more than happy to oblige by handing me the screenshots which I sent to his parents. They obviously accused me of fabricating them out of revenge, so I asked my friend to show them the conversation firsthand next Sunday after sermon, which he did. A year before outing me, he impregnated a girl who ended up getting an abortion he paid for. With the quid pro quo, she wouldn't say who the father was. It was already too late for her, since her parents knew she was pregnant, so she didn't mind taking the entire fall herself. I knew that girl pretty well. We weren't friends, but we were close politically, and would have the occasional discussion. She was livid with Alex for outing me and decided, after I not so subtly suggested it, to do a call-out post on the town's Facebook group with screenshots of their conversations. Alex had an alt-right trolling account that he used to harass black people. I'm talking hard RN words, monkey jokes, IQ graphs and the likes. Dude, this person sucks. Multiple people, mostly the one black kid who went to this school, reported him, but it was practically impossible to prove he was behind the account, until I realized he sometimes logged into it on the school's computers and gave that as a tip to the principal. I'm not sure what the IT guy technically did, but he caught him red-handed and ended up getting a week's suspension and having to apologize in front of the whole school. So Alex went from model son to junkie baby murdering Nazi overnight. His parents decided to kick him out without a penny after graduation. He still got into an Ivy League school, but without his parents' support, he had to juggle school and a part-time job. He dropped out a year in. He's now apparently a divorced, absentee father who's involved with 2 multi-level marketing schemes at once, from a valedictorian who was destined to become a DC lawyer to that. And that's going to be it, guys. I hope you enjoyed the stories in r/NuclearRevenge. Let me know what you'd like to listen to next in the comment section below, and also hit that subscribe button because I post new Reddit content every single day. My name is Trey, this was Reload Reacts, and I will see you in May with the next video.